The laughter of classmates, the lectures, the punishments, the endless message that there is something wrong with them. And that is the true sickness, not the difference itself, not the diversity of expression or behavior, but the social obsession with correction, the compulsion to punish what does not mirror a predetermined image. Imagine what the world would look like if that energy were redirected. If instead of policing childhood, we protected it. If instead of mocking, we encouraged. If instead of labeling, we listened. We would have more inventors, more artists, more scientists, more leaders. We would have people who knew who they were and had never been punished for it. People who could imagine new solutions because they had never been trained to suppress their imagination. People who could love without fear, work without shame, speak without rehearsing every word to avoid condemnation. Instead, we have a generation of people who were taught that their feelings were wrong, that their instincts were dangerous, and that their self-expression was selfish. A generation taught to apologize for existing. This is not a natural outcome. This is engineered. Engineered by adults who could not handle their own complexity and chose to erase it in others. Engineered by institutions that profit from obedience. Engineered by cultures that reward sameness and punish deviation. And worst of all, it's disguised as love, disguised as care, disguised as preparation. But it is none of those things. It is a prison, built out of rules no one voted for, enforced by people who were too afraid to question them, and paid for with the potential of every child who has ever been told to act normal. What I am saying is not theoretical. It is visible in every classroom, every home, every court where a child's future is debated without ever asking what that child wants. It is visible in the statistics we ignore, in the lives that never get to fully emerge. The truth is simple. Children are not the problem. Our fear is. Our refusal to accept what we do not control is. Our obsession with correction is. And until we admit that, nothing will change. What society rarely admits is that its rules for children are not built on logic or evidence. They're built on imitation. Adults repeat what was done to them, not because it worked, but because it's familiar. The pain is rationalized, the humiliation rebranded as necessary. And the moment someone dares question that cycle, they're dismissed as naive, radical, or worse, dangerous. The truth is that many adults are afraid of seeing themselves in the children they punish. They remember the terror of standing out, of being mocked or corrected, and instead of healing that wound, they pass it on. Not because it's right, but because they survived it and believe survival is the only proof something was worthwhile. That is not survival. That is resignation. A child isn't supposed to survive childhood. A child is supposed to live it, to grow, to explore, to stumble, to find out who they are without the threat of erasure hanging over every word or movement. But instead, society weaponizes childhood, turning it into a performance. The reward for those who conform? Conditional approval. The punishment for those who don't? Rejection, isolation, and sometimes institutionalized correction. Entire industries have been built on the premise that difference must be diagnosed. When a child acts outside expectations, the first question is not, what does this child need? But what's wrong with this child? And so, professionals are called in. Assessments are made. Labels are assigned. Treatments are proposed. Not because the child is suffering, but because the adults are. This isn't care. This is containment. A well-polished mechanism to suppress discomfort under the guise of support. And it works because it's embedded in everything, from the books we assign to children, to the training we give teachers, to the policies that frame nonconformity as disorder. And when the child resists, society escalates. It shames them in front of peers. It calls in reinforcements. It makes examples of them. It may even call their behavior a risk to others, because that is the ultimate weapon, to turn the group against the individual and disguise it as protection. But what does this protection really protect? Not the child, not their future. It protects illusions, illusions of order, of purity, of simplicity. These illusions comfort the adult who cannot cope with complexity. They validate the institutions that survive only by creating problems they pretend to solve. They justify policies rooted not in science, but in paranoia. And the cost is always the same. The child pays. Not once, but for the rest of their life. Because once a child internalizes that they are wrong simply for being different, that belief becomes a parasite. It lodges deep in the psyche. It alters how they make decisions, how they relate to others, how they see their own value. Years later, these same children, now adults, walk into therapy not because they are unstable, but because they were taught to hate the parts of themselves that made them human. And the therapists, the doctors, the mentors who truly care spend their lives undoing damage that never needed to happen in the first place. We like to talk about resilience, as if the ability to endure abuse is something to celebrate. But resilience is not healing. Resilience is adaptation to pain. And when we glorify it, we excuse the systems that made it necessary. No child should have to be resilient to survive their home, their school, their community. And yet we praise those who make it through, while ignoring those who didn't. Those who fell silent, who disappeared, who turned their pain inward or outward because there was no one to protect them when it mattered most. I am done being polite about it. If adults really wanted to protect children, they would stop harming them. They would stop projecting their fears onto them. They would stop pretending that control is the same as care. And they would start listening. But listening requires humility. It requires acknowledging that your discomfort is not the child's fault, that your need for order does not justify their suffering, that your memories of being corrected do not make correction virtuous, that the way you were raised might not have been right, even if it felt normal. None of this is about making things easier for children. It's about making things possible. It's about creating a world where children do not have to waste their energy on self-defense before they've even developed a sense of self, where they are not punished for curiosity, where they are not corrected for joy. There will always be those who claim that this is dangerous. That difference leads to chaos. But the only chaos I see is the one caused by repression. The chaos of generations unable to speak honestly. The chaos of families built on secrets and shame. The chaos of policies written by people who would rather erase reality than understand it. We have the research. We have the data. We have the history. And still, we refuse to act. That refusal is no longer ignorance. It is a choice. A choice to preserve old hierarchies. A choice to enforce silence. A choice to sacrifice the well-being of children to maintain a fiction. But the world is changing. Slowly, painfully, it is changing. And the people trying to stop that change are not protectors. They are saboteurs. They want a future that mirrors their past, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. And they're willing to drag children backward to get it. We need to stop letting them speak on behalf of children. We need to stop letting them define what is natural, acceptable, or respectable. We need to reclaim childhood from those who believe it's their right to shape it into something uniform and manageable. Childhood is not a factory. It is not a pipeline. It is not a dress rehearsal for adulthood. It is a stage of life that deserves respect in its own right, with its own rules and rhythms. And the more we interfere with it out of fear, the more we damage what could have been. We must stop pretending that this harm is incidental. It is intentional, calculated, rehearsed. Institutions are trained to enforce it. Families are pressured to uphold it. Entire political agendas are built on it. And all of it depends on one thing: silence. The child must not speak. The child must not question. The child must not resist. But some children do. And it is those children, those who refuse to be erased, who will one day rebuild what society tried to destroy. If we're lucky, they'll still want to. The most disturbing part of all this is not how society reacts to difference, but how it plans for its elimination. This isn't a spontaneous act of fear. It's a strategy, a system with incentives. From the moment a child deviates from an unspoken script, the response is calibrated. Ridicule from peers, corrections from teachers, disappointment from parents, silence from leaders. The goal is clear: get the child back in line, or make them disappear. You can see it in policy, where the language is always vague enough to permit abuse, but sharp enough to target anyone who dares step outside the mold. You can see it in the media, where only one kind of childhood is idealized and all others are pathologized or erased. You can see it in how resources are distributed, who gets support, who gets punished, who gets reformed. And if a child dares to push forward, to succeed without changing, society doesn't celebrate. It gets uncomfortable. It begins to demand explanations. It looks for some external reason, some trauma, some influence, to explain why this person refuses to disappear. Because to admit that they were always valid, always worthy, always whole would be to admit that society was wrong. And society doesn't apologize. It just tightens the screws. It rewrites the narrative. It says they were strong, not we were cruel. It says they overcame, not we imposed. The system absolves itself and praises the survivor it tried to destroy. That is the final insult. There are children right now being told that their way of speaking is unacceptable, that their favorite colors are suspicious, that their interests are deviant, that their dreams are unrealistic, that their existence is inconvenient. And this is called education. This is called structure. This is what passes for responsibility. But let's be clear, this is neither guidance nor discipline. It is sabotage. It is the targeted demolition of self-worth before that worth can even be formed. And the adults behind it are not guardians. They are architects of shame, enforcing codes of behavior that serve no moral or functional purpose beyond maintaining obedience. We don't need more obedient children. We need more free ones. Children who know themselves before the world tells them who to be. Children who are not punished for honesty. Children who are not taught to apologize for existing. And to get there, we must dismantle everything that pretends to be in their best interest but exists only to crush them. That means questioning everything, yes, everything. Family traditions, school rules, public policy, religious dogma, cultural myths. If it cannot survive scrutiny, it has no place shaping a child's life. We must also make space for the children who already carry the damage. Those who were silenced before they had words, who learned early that approval had conditions, who now sit in classrooms or homes afraid to move, speak, or feel too much. We owe them more than acknowledgement. We owe them change. And that change begins by stopping the lie that difference is dangerous, the lie that expression is instability, the lie that variation is rebellion. It is none of those things. It is life. And any society that cannot make peace with the diversity of life is a society preparing for its own decline. Because difference is not going away. It never was. It never will. You can suppress it, but it returns. You can silence it, but it finds new languages. You can punish it, but eventually it outlasts the punishment. The question is not whether children will be different. The question is whether we will deserve them when they are. You cannot measure a child's worth by how much they resemble you. You cannot plan their future around your past. You cannot lead them into adulthood by dragging them through fear. If your vision of protection involves crushing spirit, you are not protecting anyone. You are protecting yourself from truth. It is time to stop treating children as blank slates and start recognizing them as complete beings with their own rhythms, instincts, and inner logic. The work of the adult is not to rewrite the child, but to listen, to support, to provide space, to protect, not to punish, to guide, not to dictate, to expand their world, not reduce it. The children who resist conformity are not broken. They are responding to a world that refuses to see them. They are fighting for their own survival, not against rules, but against erasure. And if we have any integrity at all, we will stop interpreting that resistance as rebellion and start seeing it as a call for dignity. Because when we fail to answer that call, the cost is not only theirs, it is ours. Every time a child is forced into silence, we lose what they might have taught us. Every time a child is punished for joy, we lose a chance at deeper humanity. Every time we destroy what we cannot control, we forfeit a future that could have included all of us. Let those who truly care about children stop using them as weapons in ideological wars. Stop projecting their discomfort as righteous authority. Stop shaping childhood in the image of fear. There is no courage in raising children to be afraid of who they are. There is no strength in demanding silence. There is no wisdom in demanding sameness. If you want a society that thrives, raise children who thrive, not survive, not comply, thrive. That will never happen while difference is treated like a threat and conformity like a virtue. There is no neutral ground here. You either raise children to be free, or you raise them to be afraid. And that decision will shape not just their lives, but the world we all live in.